Happy Monday. Welcome into an all-new week of Daily Faceoff Live. I'm Tyler Uremchek. He is Frank Seravalli, and the show is brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And Frank, what a weekend from every perspective. First off, we had 3 trades go down in the NHL and also a stunner in the NBA. I mean, you as an insider can probably appreciate Sham Charania's fingers were probably jittering as he typed that one out and hit the world with that stunner.
Yeah, I got a feeling on a way lesser scale from the Mikko Rantanen trade, but it was the feeling is real.
Yeah, it is quite something. I had a similar reaction when I saw the Doncic deal to when I saw the Rantanen deal. I was like, was Frank hacked? Is this really Frank? I'm like, yeah, that's a verified thing. This is Frank. But that was a crazy one. There's been a couple of stunners in sports recently. But I guess let's start, Frank, today's show. And we're going to be joined by Brien Rea in a little bit. We'll talk about that Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci deal. But let's start with the deal that wasn't a stunner at all. It's our nightcap, and it's brought to you by JP Wiser's, proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL, offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice to enhance every game night experience. JP Wiser's, the official whiskey of game night. And Frank, we had heard Miller and the Rangers, the rumblings for weeks, almost, it's been north of a month now at this point. You had reported a few weeks ago that Chris Drury and Patrick Allvin were close to the finish line on a deal, then it fell apart. So I guess my question is, how close do you think this final deal and final package was to the one that fell short a few weeks back?
Pretty close. The Canucks added in Eric Brandstrom, and I think the New York Rangers finally got to a place where they felt like they were getting proper value in return, which I think they always knew they were, but it was the idea of taking on that full JT Miller salary that was problematic from an ownership perspective. So in this case, look, the Rangers aren't sending a lot back for a guy who was a top 15 player in the league the last 2 seasons. And he arrives in New York, unceremoniously moves in with one of his close childhood friends in Vincent Trocheck, and does some JT Miller things right off the hop. 2 goals his first game. This weekend looks like he's every bit the player that is going to drag the New York Rangers back into the fight and back into the playoffs. And he's home. He's back in a place where he started his career, and this just looks like it fits.
What do you make of maybe some of the people who are going, oh, that the 5 more years on the deal, $8 million? Like, I saw a little bit of that, and I'm going, hey, if you're Chris Drury, you can't worry about that. You need to worry about making the playoffs this year. And if you can get, as you just said, this JT Miller, 1836 time on ice through 2 games, 4 points, like, he just looked like he gave them a different vibe and almost a whole new life. Like, if you're Chris Drury, you're going, I do not care about years 2, 3, 4, and 5. I care about right now. Yeah,
and who's to say he's even going to be the general manager then? I think you have an obligation to your fan base, to Igor Shesterkin, to Adam Fox, to Artemi Panarin, to everyone that you've put together. This team has been close to getting to a Stanley Cup final. I'm not saying they're going to get there this year, because they're obviously still, is some surgery to do. Jacob Trouba out. They've got to rejig that blue line and figure out what it looks like. But one of the biggest things that this Ranger team was missing was some sandpaper, and not from like hey, we're going to fight you and drop the gloves or anything like that, but more so just from a pushback perspective that I think JT Miller really just, he brings to the table. And a lot of the things that I think ended up rubbing people the wrong way, or perhaps potentially one really sensitive Swede in Vancouver, that, made him so popular in Vancouver. That's the other part of this, is it kind of feels, even though it's happened and even though we knew it was going to happen, it feels kind of amazing that it did happen. That, go back to that playoff series. You spent time in Vancouver against the Oilers. JT Miller's name was reverberating throughout that city. And, to think that whole thing has ended and they've moved on and he's now in New York where he's going to become a fan favorite again, it's still a little bit surprising.
Yeah, we got a comment here from Josh, who's a Rangers fan. Miller makes everyone better right now. His impact in 2 games has been glaring. I'm interested to see. I know they'd kind of shuffled some things around, had guys on the wing. I'm interested to see how this can impact Mika Zibanejad as well. Does it take some of the pressure off, and can you get just even close to the old Mika back?
I think the answer is yes, and takes some pressure off just being shifted to the wing. Hey, you don't have to be. I think that was one thing that stood out. He wasn't very defensively reliable recently,
Mhm.
and to take some of that pressure off, to put him with a guy who can do a lot of different things. If you're going to play him there in JT Miller, perfect. But either way, just taking some of the heat off of Zibanejad, I think will pay some dividends for sure.
Let's talk about the Canucks side of this transaction. And they did eventually flip that first round pick. We can touch on that deal in a moment. But all things considered here for Vancouver, it felt like they were kind of in a corner with having to trade JT Miller. And I know he wasn't sitting there and, holding a gun to their head saying it's the New York Rangers or it's absolutely nobody. But all things considered, how do you think Patrick Allvin and company did on this deal?
Look, I think you have to evaluate this through the totality of two transactions because they're not separate. I don't think they got a good return for JT Miller. Filipino wasn't the best center traded last week, not including Miller. That was Morgan Frost. Then you add in I think really at the end of the day, Filipino is a 3C. And then you add in the concussion history, and it's not really that impressive. Maybe they like Victor Mancini, and maybe he can turn into something as a 4 or 5. That would be a big shot in the arm. But to take the first round pick and then flip it so quickly, hours later, that's where they lost me. Because Marcus Pettersson has been available for a long, long time. And I know they know the player, but the fact that you traded what could eventually turn into an unprotected 2026 first round pick, which could be a massive asset. And yet it does help that you move off of the last years of the Danton Heinen and Vinny Desharnais contracts. That part was kind of underrated. But I think Marcus Pettersson is a number 5 defenseman. And I think when you look at his struggles, if you really, really key in and watch his game, they needed an efficient puck moving defenseman, and he's not that. He's a guy who likes to chip the puck off the glass, to make little quick, sort of stabs at it. He's not a great puck mover. And I think to react so quickly to that and make that deal, I think the Canucks are going to be way worse off in the long haul. It felt like a reactionary move to try and stabilize this team right now, and they gave up a really good asset in order to do it. And so I don't know that doing it 24, 48, 72 hours later makes any sense. It would have made more sense to sit back, evaluate the market as a whole, and use these 5 weeks before the deadline to really make sure that you key in on exactly what you need. Because now, also as a pending unrestricted free agent, they've put themselves in a spot where I'm sure they're going to feel pressure to extend Pettersson regardless of whatever he looks like over this next 5-week stretch. And I'm not a believer that Marcus Pettersson is the guy to truly help and fix the Vancouver Canucks.
I'm with you, and I agree on the pressure to extend him thing. They've signed some bad free agent deals there in the past, and the idea that they're going to get Marcus Pettersson to some sweetheart deal, if they let him walk and you're sitting there in July going, wow, 12 months ago we had JT Miller, and now all we have to show for it is what? Hedl and Mancini. And maybe you sign Drew O'Connor. Like it doesn't look good on paper. And the other side of it, Frank, I guess to wrap this up, because I know we have to move along. Does this mean Elias Pettersson's safe, or is it just kind of like a safe for now?
No, I think he's on the clock. I think Patrick Allvin made it very clear in no uncertain terms that they expect a lot more. We've had a full calendar year of Pettersson not playing close to what he, is an $11.6 million value. And I think he's got a few weeks to figure out and to show that he can get back to that level. If not, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Canucks trade him before the deadline. And I think they will have put themselves in a position, if he doesn't show more, where if not before the deadline, they absolutely would have to trade him before his full no trade clause kicks in on July 1. So I think this just means, hey, new trade targets board out today. Pettersson, he's still on the board. He's not going anywhere. And it's up to him to prove that he can get back to that level, because I think the Canucks will have done some serious harm. I think they've already done serious harm to their team year over year. Losing Miller as one of the true backbones and drivers. I'm just not convinced at this juncture that Pettersson is a driver.
You talked about the new trade targets board, Frank. It's out now at dailyfaceoff.com. So let's dig into a couple of the interesting names on your new board. And as I went through, it's like, okay, yeah, Nelson's still at the top. There's Tanev and Ristolainen. And I'm scrolling, browsing. Whoa, Seth Jones at number 8 on your list, Frank. 5 more years at $9.5 million. Yourself and Craig Button this morning on a new edition of the DFO Rundown talked about how, maybe some cost certainty in terms of the cap and knowing how much it's going up in each of the next few seasons. Maybe that changes Seth Jones' value on the trade market.
I think you have to consider it for sure. No, I think that when you look at Seth Jones' deal, $9.5 million, the perception of that deal changes if 3 years from now we're talking about $113.5 million. Like, he's a good defenseman, but he's an overpaid defenseman right now. Right now. He also has been put in a position where he's been playing 25 minutes and 18 seconds a night in 4 years for the Blackhawks. He's doesn't have any help. He's asked to do way too much. And oh, by the way, he has nothing to play for. The Blackhawks season has been over by the time you get to the end of training camp. That's really tough for anyone in a competitive environment. So I do think that the Blackhawks are open to being creative and to try and figure out a solution here. I think one really interesting fit for me was the Dallas Stars, which I think is off the table now after making the trade over the weekend, and looking forward to getting Brien Rea's thoughts in 1 minute. But I think when you look at Seth Jones now and the cap going up, if you're a team in the market for a right shot defenseman that could put up some points, that is such an effortless and efficient skater that is going to age really well on the age curve chart, I think Seth Jones is someone that you'd have to take a long look at.
Yeah, 24 points in 35 games playing on that Blackhawks team is still pretty impressive. Not $9.5 million impressive, but again, I could see a team going, all right, in a couple of years, that's really only like 8% of the cap. And if we can find something there, you're not going to have to give up a lot to get them, right?
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though. I think if you were willing to give up a lot, the Blackhawks might be willing to retain a bit of it. And that's where it could get interesting.
Indeed. Okay, one more trade targets update here, Frank. We'll probably have more on this throughout the week, but just looking at your top 5, like I said, Nelson, Tanev, Ristolainen, Byram, all those guys have been on your board over the past few weeks here. Casey Mittelstadt at number 5, though, my eyebrow raised there as well. He's got 2 more years at $5.75 million. The Avs already made one big splash, moving out Mikko Rantanen. What would be the logic or maybe their thinking in a potential Casey Mittelstadt deal?
Just hasn't been good enough. Hasn't had the consistency. I think the Avs were hoping that he'd be more high end to this. He hasn't been, and the fact that both him and Byram are on my trade targets board back to back, less than a year after their trade for each other, 1-for-1, would give you an indication that neither side has really been thrilled with how this has played out. I still think Mittelstadt has some potential. I think they need, and as Craig Button pointed out on the rundown this morning, more of a hard edge in Colorado. It would have been so fascinating if JT Miller would have ended up there, not just from a Nathan McKinnon, JT Miller in the same room perspective, but two guys who desperately want to win. And I could even see the cap making sense in light of the Rantanen deal as well. And Mittelstadt would have been a significant improvement for the Vancouver Canucks over Filipino. So interesting to consider all the way around. I think the Avs are definitely intrigued and interested to move Mittelstadt. Whether or not that ends up coming to fruition or not, we'll see.
And it'd be safe to say it's a part of, like, you'd move out Mittelstadt and you're going to use the assets you get, or you're trying to get something to help now. This isn't like, hey, let's get some picks and sit on them for a few months.
No, I don't think the Avs they're definitely in the window where they want to win now. So it might have to be a 2-part transaction, not all that different than the Miller and Pettersson deals that we saw, Marcus Pettersson. Yeah. But I think the Avs, they want to win. And I think they also had a determination, even with Rantanen there, that what they had and their lack of depth wasn't a way to get there.
Let's continue along. Talk about the one trade from the weekend we haven't touched on yet. It happened out in Dallas. It's the All 32. It's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, Canadian owned and operated since 1972. And you can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program. It all comes with their unbeatable pricing policy. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. Always a pleasure to welcome Brien Rea to the show from the Victory Plus Network, Dallas Stars broadcast. And Brien, let's talk about that deal. It's not often that Jim Nill parts with a first-round pick, but he does that to get both Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci. Were those two players, was this the type of package that you think it was worth jumping the market for and giving up a first for?
I think given the situation, yeah, and I appreciate you guys having me on. The more I've thought about the deal, I try to put some context on it. The first round pick specifically, unless something absolutely catastrophic happens, this is a first round pick that's going to be 25 or lower in the draft this summer. So it's not like it was a top 15 or a top 10 pick. So I don't want to devalue a first round pick, but I do think there are different ways to look at the first round pick. I think second of all, the Miro Heiskanen situation absolutely changes everything for this team. And so to go get Mikael Granlund, you already had a hole with Seguin in your top six. He plays in all situations, maybe not the same type of player as Tyler Seguin, but he's 20 plus minutes a night. It's penalty kill time. It's power play time. And he plays down the middle. On paper, you're checking off a handful of boxes that have been left behind with that Tyler Seguin vacancy. The Cody Ceci element to it, and the fourth round pick essentially being attached to him if you're looking at piece for piece on this trade. I know the analytics community does not love Cody Ceci, but I think you look at a player that also plays 20 minutes a night and is hitting about 3.5 minutes, I think, on the penalty kill. And when Miro Heiskanen goes down, you lose a 20-plus minute a night player. You lose somebody who was running your number one power play. Well, Thomas Harley has to take over that role, and he was one of your main penalty-killing defensemen. So you had a hole there as well that needed to be filled. You're not going to replace Miro Heiskanen in any way, shape, or form. No matter how you try to do it, it's not going to happen. But I think on paper, there were very specific roles, minutes, and items that needed to be checked off, and Granlund and Ceci fill each of those for now. Long-term for Cody Ceci, as long as he is maintaining at 5-on-5 that third pair for Dallas, that's a safe, reasonable role for him to work on the back end. You know, Niels Lundqvist is out for the year. Brendan Smith was playing forward because of the injuries Dallas had. And Matt Dumba's kind of been inconsistent this year. There's been some good, there's been some bad, but on that third pair, it's not like something gets better or worse. You're really just trying to improve it any way you can. And can Cody Ceci bring some stability there? So I know people see the first round pick, but I think when you look at where that pick's going to fall, combined with what Dallas needed to fill with the Miro Heiskanen injury, right now the trade makes sense, I think, for everybody on both sides. We'll see how it plays out long term, but it does make sense, I think, for both teams.
Brien, one of the things that I was concerned about with this trade is that Mikael Granlund is someone that has shown kind of historically that when he does move, it takes him a little while to get up to speed. How much do you think having the other Finns there in Dallas will help with that transition?
He had an assist last night, so he got off the plane, didn't have a morning skate yesterday, and found a way to pick up a point in the win over Columbus. But I agree with you, Frank. I hear what you're saying. I think the Finnish connection, number one, helps greatly. Number two, the Matt Duchene connection. They played together in Nashville. So there's an added element there. And then I think thirdly, you're leaving a team in San Jose where you essentially had to be the guy, the number one center. And you're coming to a team in Dallas where I don't think sheltered is the right word, but Mikael Granlund does not need to shelter the load here that he was doing in San Jose. You can call it a complementary player. There's a role for you. There's absolutely clear minutes for you, but he's not brought in here to be the savior or to try and lift this team to a different level. They have their pieces in place to try and go chase a Stanley Cup. So I think that takes a little bit of pressure off and puts him in a pretty comfortable situation. Off the ice, as you said, you have people that you know very well and that you can lean on. on the ice, you can find a role for yourself, but it does not need to be that in game one, you have to physically change the makeup of this team single-handedly. So I think it is a very comfortable setting for both players, Granlund specifically, but for both players.
Mm-hmm. What is it about this Stars team that's improved so dramatically? Like, you look back to the Christmas break, and I thought they actually had a really tough start to the season to that point in time. I don't know if you want to call it a malaise. They looked like a team that was probably a little bit tired at times. And since then, they've been one of the best teams in the league. Everyone's talked about how hot the Detroit Red Wings have been. The Stars have an equal record, 14-4 since Christmas. What's been the difference?
First of all, I think Jim Nill and Peter DeBoer don't mind flying under the radar if they want to keep winning hockey games like this. I think the biggest thing was, it was strange. It was a very slow start offensively. The benefit they had is Dallas, pretty much since day one, has been a very good team defensively, locking things down. Their metrics look good. The goals against average just looked good on the surface. So they had a foundation in place to keep them within any hockey game they played. Jason Robertson had foot surgery in the offseason. He did not look like his normal self really through October, November, maybe even the first half of December. Wyatt Johnston was getting bounced all around the lineup. They wanted to try him up top with Hintz and Robertson. None of those three could really get any traction or get going. So then they started to move him around. Logan Stankoven was being moved around. The only line that was doing anything consistently was Marchment, Duchesne, and Sagan. And then you lost Tyler Sagan long term. So they've kind of been stuck in this stretch where they just could not get anybody in a steady place to really build some traction through the first 3 months of the season. But as you said, Frank, right about December 1st, Jason Robertson started to become a point-a-game player. Rope Hintz started to – he was fairly consistent, but he started to find another level. They put Wyatt Johnston back in the third-line center role, playing alongside Jamie Benn, which he had done pretty much his entire career. And he started to find some steadiness and some stability. And then outside of all that, their power play, especially on home ice, was an absolute mess. For the first 3 months of the year. It was something like 9% through October, November, and December on home ice, which is really weird to think about just given the bodies that are on that power play. So I think part of it was the lack of consistency with the slow start, maybe the hockey they played, Jason Robertson surgery, learning to live without Joe Pavelski on the power play. But ever since the calendar turned to 2025, something flipped. And they have seemed to have found a much more consistent element in their play. Jason Robertson's going to the net front more. The power play has shifted some things around. Wyatt Johnston found some stability. Now they are using him on the right wing of Hintz and Robertson. And for some reason, it's working. Wyatt's working now in January, but not in October. I wish I had a better scientific answer for you, but I don't. But yeah, I think for whatever reason, just that slow malaise, as you called it, disappeared when the calendar turned to January.
Brien, as always, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for popping on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Keep cruising along with the show. Frank, hashtag Ask DFO. I got a question to throw your way, but first, our poll question results. Today's question was, which team improved the most this weekend? The Canucks, the Stars, or the Rangers? The Rangers run away with this one, but I do think the Stars scratched a couple of interesting itches with that move, like we just talked about with Brien.
Yeah, look, they were in a unique spot because they had so much LTIR space that they could spend. My only question is, and look, full marks to the Sharks because they were able to, without having any salary retention spots, were able to trade Granlund and Ceci at full boat, which is hard to do. Only so many teams could even be in a market to take one of those guys, let alone two. So credit to them, and they get a quality asset or two potentially in return. But my only question for the Stars would be, I like the idea that Granlund has experience with Duchesne and, is a Finn, and maybe that all works out. Was this the best two pieces that the Dallas Stars could add to their team? I'm not convinced that was the case looking at the marketplace, but obviously I'm open to being proven wrong.
Yeah, I do kind of agree with you a bit on the price being paid. Like if I was Jim Nill and Mike Greer goes, I want a first and a fourth. I know it could become a third, but I'd be sitting there going, well, like you said, no retained salary spots left in San Jose. Like if you're going to get rid of these guys, what other contenders giving you anything decent for them? Because not many teams.
It's not even the price. Like I don't have any issue with the price. It's the fit. Like how much does Granlund and Ceci improve the Dallas Stars' chances to win? I just don't know the answer.
All right. Jay is in with a question I want to throw your way, Frank. In Danny Briere's press conference, he said the Farabee trade was about clearing cap space so they can get their number one center. What centers will they be focused on? Is this a potential fit for a Middlestat or a Cousins, or are they aiming higher now?
No, I would think if they're trying to go for it and they're moving these pieces out and they're trying to get set, it would have to be thinking about someone like an Elias Pettersson.
That'd be an interesting fit with Torts. Let's move along to our daily bets for Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, for the second time since Christmas, I hit my goal scorer parlay on a Friday night. 8-1. It felt nice. I saw someone was tweeting me. They were riding along and fired up too. Tonight, I'm going with a little same gamer for the only game on the slate. Brady Tkachuk has hit his shot prop in 4 of his last 5. I like him to hit the shots, him to get a point, and the Sens to beat the Predators. It all comes out to a very nice plus 320 because the Sens are underdogs and they could be welcoming Linus Ullmark back to the crease tonight as well. So a lot of reasons why I like the Senators, who are currently on a 4-game winning streak as well. Frank, that brings us to garbage time. And listen, you sent this along. I can't read it. I get a queasy stomach. But what Aaron Portzline was reporting about James Van Riemsdyk,
yeah, it was this last part. The post-game x-ray revealed a tooth was still lodged in his bottom lip after it was stitched up. Yeah, gross. But here's the amazing part. He's eating through a straw and will still play tonight against the Dallas Stars. Insane. And meanwhile, Joel Embiid is missing 20 games this year with a hangnail, making $53 or $58 million a year. Like, come on. Totally different sport. By the way, JVR playing like league minimum salary this year.
Yep.
And I know he's made a pile of money in his career, but not about the money. Love of the game. So it's they're just hockey players are just different. They just are.
Yeah, and again, it's not like he played 9 minutes either. Like he got a point and played 14 and a half minutes. That's like he was out there contributing. He wasn't.
I don't care if he's out one shift, putting your gear on, getting, wearing the bubble, doing all that. And playing a game, it's insane. Most people wouldn't get off their couch for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's wild. And another piece of bad luck for Columbus. Kirill Marchenko took a puck to the face while he was sitting on the bench in that game against Dallas. He's got a broken jaw. One of the best stories in the NHL this year has been Kirill Marchenko, who is on pace for north of 35 goals. That's a big, big loss for Columbus.
It is. And I wonder how much it changes the East playoff race, if at all.
Yeah.
Columbus Blue Jackets in a playoff spot today. Tampa Bay Lightning out. Boston Bruins out. New York Rangers out. Got a chance to see this standings table shaken up a bit. Red Wings in.
Yeah, really interesting. All right, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. It's just the beginning of the week, though. We'll have Stephen Ellis, John Goins, all the usuals throughout the next 4 days. And, of course, more trade talk as well. Thanks for tuning in over on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. Hit the subscribe button before you close your browser. And make sure you come right back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. Chat with you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.